Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we're continuing our series on companies that built the world, this time looking at IBM.
International Business Machines
Corporation. Yes.
I can't believe we didn't do this one earlier. That's my fact.
Yeah, that's a big one, right?
It's a big deal.
There's a couple, but this one we really should have. They weren't always IBM. They were CTR, which was the Computing, Tabulating, Recording Company.
CTR is kind of cool too, just saying.
Yeah. I mean, sort of.
I mean, I don't know.
Kind of terrible.
I don't know if you'd want to be known as the tabulating company like nowadays. I guess back in the day when you tabulated, it'd be cool.
That was like 1911. I mean, they were kind of a big deal then, right? So tabulating was a thing. But yeah, how about that?
That's interesting. So a couple numbers and just some general facts about IBM as they are today, James. So they are headquartered in Armonk, New York, which I have no idea where that is. I probably should have Googled it.
It's close to New York City. I did Google it. And when you Google that, that's immediately what comes up is Armonk, IBM. New York, IBM. Like that's it.
Their stock as of yesterday was trading for a whopping $127.15.
Yeah.
So it's buyable. It's not Apple stock or Google stock. It's purchasable.
5.27% dividend yield though. So that's solid.
I don't know what that means, but that sounds good.
Well, okay.
We'll have to do a thing on how stock works one of these days. Their current CEO is a cat by the name of Arvind Krishna. He's been the CEO since April 6th, 2020, so not all that long. Their revenue in 2021 was the most recent I could find, was 57.35 billion with a B US dollars. That's not too shabby, James.
Now that is how you sponsor a mega podcast.
I really. So let's just say they gave us like $100,000. It doesn't even adjust the decimal point at all. Like how hard could it be, IBM? Come on.
That's some sort of like Superman Office Space rounding error thing that they could be doing.
Pony up. I mean, we're definitely going to help revenue for you after this podcast goes live. I bet they're up to 60
billion by the time this is done.
If you have any questions for them, you can call them at 1-877-426-6006, and someone in customer service will be with you, I'm sure, quickly.
Oh man, we should do a call and just record it and put it on the podcast. How good would that be?
It might be illegal, just saying.
Probably.
They have so the number of employees kind of was. I'm assuming this is all their subsidiaries because they got a boatload of subsidiaries. They have 350,000 plus employees.
I saw that. Yeah, that's a couple.
Like our company's like what 7,000.
I think we're like 11 or 10.
Oh, okay, but even still, it's not 350,000. I mean,
again, rounding error, right?
Crazy.
Yeah.
There's a boatload of subsidiaries, but the only notable one that I kind of knew of and heard of was a company by the name of Red Hat. They are They
spent a ton on Red Hat.
Yeah, so Red Hat is like an open source language platform operating system. You know, it's a really big deal in the open source kind of community. So they had a whole bunch of other ones, acquisitions and subsidiaries, but that was the only notable one that I saw.
I know of one that I'll mention through the histories that I recognize, but you're right. Most of the acquisitions, they do have a number, but aren't really huge. Like it really surprises me that there weren't more big name acquisitions for a company of this size. But what can you do?
We gonna hit the histories?
Oh, I want to hit. Can I start?
You can start, and I'll just chime in because we probably didn't cut and paste from the same pages. Just saying.
I called my friend. What was his name that runs this joint?
Arvid.
Yeah, I called Arvid up and got his scoop. So that's where mine came from. I told you CTR was the original, right? Founder Charles Ranlett Flint. And he didn't actually make CTR out of nothings. Instead, it was by combining three companies that had existed since the late 1800s: the Computing Scale Company, the Tabulating Machine Company, and the Time Recording Company,
So, hold on.
CTR.
So before we go on, like, I feel like the creativity that went into company naming
Right?
back in the late 1800s was pretty poor. So you make computing scales. We will be a computing scale company. We make tabulating machines. We're going to be a tabulating machine company. We make time recording machines. So we'll be the time recording. I mean, come on, people.
It's nothing like unprofessional
Yeah.
engineering, right?
Apple, Google, Microsoft. I mean, come on, be a little more creative. I mean, I know it's the 1800s and there's probably a lot of like lead and mercury in their water, but come on.
Wow, we went there, huh? All right. I
Sorry.
agree completely. No. So early years of CTR, they focused on products like calculating machines, time recorders, punch card systems, because those were a thing. So that's kind of interesting. They changed their name to IBM in 1924 under the leadership of a name we probably recognize, even though we don't know it, Thomas Watson.
T-Bone.
T-Bone Watson, a man of considerable marketing skills. That's my kind of man, Luke. He was a general manager in 1914, and then he got complete control by 24. The company was kind of floundering, though. And even though it was the leader in American manufacturing of punch card tabulating systems used by the government and other businesses, he turned it into that. He built a really strong sales team, and that's kind of got IBM on the map.
I was reading. Get
by the end of the teens, IBM had earnings over $9 million. So imagine that back in like 1913 or something.
That's a lot of cash.
Yeah.
So I was reading somewhere where the sales force in particular was a big focus, and like they put a strong effort to training their sales reps. And apparently this, like the TV show Mad Men, apparently that is what they say IBM was kind of like back in the day. All the gentlemen wore like 3-piece pinstripe suits, and they all wore like wingtips, and it was a real like super like that's where this idea of professional sales, like everything you think of when you think of like old school sales, is because of the IBM, sales force. They actually had a club. We were just talking about Diamond Club. They actually had a club. It's called the 100 Percenters, and these are all of the sales people in IBM that hit 100% of their quota. And they took them on like these amazing retreats. And the one year they actually they took them camping, of all things. And they had a giant like tent city. So like the salesperson and their spouse would like go to this tent, and they had all kinds of things. They had concerts, and it was they put a big effort into the sales process and investing in their people.
Not much has changed, Luke.
No, it has not.
1933, IBM, this is just funny to me. IBM purchases the Electromatic Typewriters Inc. And that's how they entered the field of electric typewriters, eventually becoming the industry leader in electric typewriters. Like, this is a big moment in IBM history, right? To get into this kind of tech kind of field. And think about how nothing that is now. Like, it's just kind of laughable.
Fun fact. In the 1930s, the Social Security Administration adopted the company's punch card machines to help build its new network of Social Security numbers for all citizens. So literally, like, your Social Security number and my Social Security number maybe wasn't generated by an IBM, but like back then, it would have been a punch card that a system that IBM developed to generate those Social Security numbers, to keep track of them.
They got our info. Don't get on their bad side. I have a wartime connection, Luke.
I knew you would.
During World War II, IBM helped construct several high-speed electromechanical calculators that were used. Oh, and these were the precursor to the electronic computers.
Mm-hmm.
I also have another war tie-in, Luke. Should I do it now?
Please do.
Okay, this is not so good. Everything we say about IBM on this show is going to be pretty positive. This is kind of a big negative.
It's a big negative.
In 1933 through 1945, IBM equipment was used very prevalently by Germany, and it was known to be used to catalog the whereabouts of Jewish families and other groups targeted by the Nazi Party during the war. Um, you know, I don't know. Do you hold the company accountable? I don't know, but it's a pretty bad mark.
Yeah, I think as the leadership of the company, you have a choice not to sell. You know, nowadays companies do it all the time, or they choose not to. I mean, everything going on in the Ukraine right now, so many companies are choosing not to do business with Russia because of what they're doing. So I definitely think there's some accountability. Another wartime tie-in. So that machine that you were speaking about. In 1944, the automatic sequencing control calculator, or the Mark I, was developed alongside of IBM with Harvard. They used this device, the U.S. Navy used this device, the Mark I, to calculate gun trajectories on their ships. So whenever they were like going tick, 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 go, they use that to calculate the trajectory.
Didn't we do an episode on like Archimedes or someone, and he did something to calculate the trajectory of like projectiles off of ships and
I'm
stuff?
sure we did. James, I shared so much knowledge on this podcast that I just can't keep track of it all.
We've forgotten more than most mere mortals have ever learned.
That's one way of putting it.
Before we move on, Luke, we need to take a break for a word from our sponsor.
I'm going to say that it's going to be CTR Company.
All remaining profits from CTR. We do not have a sponsor this week, but we do have some shout outs.
What do we got?
Elijah B. Hey guys, I love your show. I love listening to it while I'm outside working. He does concrete and builds fences. I love hearing all the things you guys have to say. P.S. What would it take to get a sticker? You can use this on your show if you want. I just steal everyone else's. So Elijah, I appreciate that you gave me permission, and I apologize to everyone I've stolen from. Also, his subject had little fire emojis in it, so I was pretty excited.
So what it takes, Elijah, is lots of time and patience to get a sticker from James.
That is not inaccurate. William M. also wrote in.
Willie,
would you go with Willie, Bill, or Billy if you were a William or William?
I'd go with William. No, I'd go with William. Yeah, it's one of those names I don't know if I'd shorten.
What about Will I Am? You could be that guy.
I am?
No? Anyways, Black Eyed Peas. Anyways, hey guys, love listening to your show while I'm studying or at work. I'm a rising junior at Virginia Tech studying mechanical engineering, and I would love for you guys to do a show on Virginia Tech and its engineering programs. Some other recommendations I have are Lockheed Martin. How have we not done that? Or have we? I don't know.
I don't think we have.
Jet fighters like the F-22 or the F-35. Yep. And I left a good review for your show. Thanks, guys. So thank you, William, for leaving a good review for the show.
And I'm going to Virginia Tech next week.
Why?
My daughter's interested. We're going to go do a pseudo tour. So we're going to drive down to Blacksburg and spend a couple days down at Virginia Tech next week. So
no interest in going to Penn State?
I think there is, but it's just like one of those, like she just wants to get as far away from, at least now, she wants to be as far away from mom and dad as possible. We'll see if that changes as she gets a little bit older.
Sorry to hear that. All right. Well, if any of you have any topics you'd like us to cover, if you don't like the way we're portraying IBM, if you want to write in and sponsor us, anything like that, go ahead and email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review the way that William did. And as always, you can tell your smart devices to play the Unprofessional Engineering Podcast anytime. And make sure you stop by our store, buy a sweet t-shirt, and get James and I out of the poorhouse.
Oh my goodness, I am so poor. We haven't had a sponsor all year, so now we have to pay for all of our stuff our own. Yeah. So go buy some t-shirts.
Please.
Luke, IBM refrained from producing electronic data processing systems until old man Watson was gone, and Thomas Watson Jr. became the president of the company in 1952. And this guy was like, I love technology. And he's like, let's move forward on this all out. Having entered the computer field, IBM's size allowed for heavy investment and development. And this capability, like investment capability, added to like its dominance in like office calculating machines, marketing expertise. They repaired their own stuff. So you would, like full service, right? Cradle to grave. And this allowed IBM to quickly become the predominant producer of American computers and computers in the American market.
So they developed the working vacuum tube computer, which I don't even understand what that means,
You wouldn't.
which is the basis for all computers until the invention of the microchip, which they didn't do.
Bums.
I know, a bunch of lazy bums.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump way forward, and then we can get into some. Or did you have stuff before like 81?
Real quick, in the 60s, they were producing 70% of the world's computers. So that's impressive. 80% was used in the US. And then just one fun fact is that IBM's most prominent public works during this time was that their hardware and other stuffs that they worked on, software, etc., was being used in NASA's Mercury and Apollo missions and, got us to the moon.
Fun fact, 4,000 IBM operators. What was the
operators?
What did they? Yeah, so there were 4,000
4,000
technicians from IBM helped Apollo's 11's moon landing mission.
Yeah, how cool is that? All right, 81. What's going on?
So arguably,
I do know. I see.
Yeah, arguably, and I didn't just say arguably because it was written in what I cut and paste. It's the beginning of the modern IBM as you and I know it today.
That's fair.
And this was the introduction of the personal computer 5150 or the PC. This is one of the first computers intended for consumer rather than dedicated business or government use. So IBM,
like before this time, they were like mainframe computers, like the big high-end computing machines.
And cats like you and I just, number one, we couldn't afford it. We didn't have a room in our house to dedicate to an entire computer. Right. So this is whenever, and we talked about this when we talked about Microsoft. So they partnered up with Microsoft Corporation, and they developed MS-DOS and built the operating systems for the first PCs that IBM was delivering.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of funny, a little like moments ago, I mentioned how IBM's massive size really benefited them to like kind of taking over the computer market, right? Well, here in the 80s, 90s timeframe, IBM's giant size actually was a hindrance for them responding rapidly to like just the crazy rates of how technology changes, right? And so by the 1990s, the company had to downsize, actually, which we all know giant companies are very nimble, so this is unusual. In 1995, though, IBM purchased Lotus Development Corporation, which was a huge software manufacturer. They made things like Lotus 123 spreadsheets, as well as Lotus Notes. So we probably know about that. But fun fact, IBM launched a hostile bid for Lotus with a $60 per share offer when Lotus stock was only trading at 32. So that's pretty significant. So some guy, Jim Manzi, for Lotus was like, yeah, not good enough, and forced IBM to increase the bid, 2x isn't enough, to $64.50 a share, which would be a $3.5 billion buyout for Lotus back in 1995. That's so many dollars.
That's like half of the world's money back then.
Oh my goodness, right? Maybe more. I don't even know.
My goodness.
Yeah. So more stuff in the 90s. Let's see. Became difficult for the company. Oh, that's right. In response to struggling, I told you they had to downsize. In December of 2005, IBM, boy, that's not that long ago, sold its personal computer division to Lenovo Group, which I didn't realize, a major Chinese manufacturer. In addition to cash, securities, and debt restructuring, IBM acquired an 18.9% stake in Lenovo, which acquired the rights to market its personal computers under the IBM label through 2010. I don't understand how that works. Like, hey, we're going to buy this, but actually we're just going to give you a giant chunk of our company. It doesn't make sense to me. To go along with this, in 2002, they also sold their magnetic hard drive business, which they invented, for $2.05 billion to Hitachi. So, shedding some of their stuff to make some cash monies and apparently own part of a company. Who knew?
Who knew?
Two fun facts for you, Luke.
Shoot.
And I think we better take another break. Fun fact
no.
number one, since 2000, IBM has placed one of its supercomputers consistently near or at the top of the industry's most powerful machines measured by standardized computing tests. So like, I think one's like Deep Blue that we can talk about later. Watson, of course, probably after those Watson families that were involved here. Fun fact number two, IBM became the first company to generate more than 3,000 patents in 1 year in 2001. And later they generated more than 4,000 patents in 2008. They now have more than 40,000 active patents for them. And apparently this creates a lot of revenue for them.
I'm going to add to that note you were making. So since 1920, did you say this? Over 150,000 U.S. patents? Did you say that?
I did not, no.
Since 1920, 6 of the 6 IBM employees have received Nobel Prizes in different categories. IBM has 5 National Medal of Science awards. They have 10 National Medal of Technology awards and 6 Turing medals, which I don't know what that is. The other ones kind of make sense. I don't know what a Turing award is.
Maybe it's a person's name. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's impressive. That is slightly more Nobel Prizes than I have.
Slightly.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on, Luke, I know it's bubbling up in you.
It's bubbling.
It's time for this week's Luke's rant.
Okay, so this is my rant is, you would think after the release of The Terminator in 1984. So think about the timeline here, James. So 1984, the Terminator movie's released, and it talks all about artificial intelligence, the machines taking over. Granted, it's a fictitious story, right? You know, it didn't really happen. At least we don't think it happened. And Skynet is this thing that does everything. So the Deep Blue you were just talking about, we'll talk about in a minute. So they developed one of the most famous AIs in history called Deep Blue. And in 1997, after the Terminator movie came out, they developed this computer that actually beat world champion Gary Kasparov, Kasparvo. Kasparov. Come on, I can't pronounce things, James.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
And he defeated him. He played a couple of times, and he finally defeated him in 1997. So, like, here's this movie. It's fictitious, right? But it talks about what happens when AI goes awry. And then I think of, like, movies like War Games with, fan of the show, Matthew Broderick. Was that who was in it? Like, why would you invent something that can learn? Bueller? Yeah, Ferris Bueller. He was in War Games. Like, why would you invent like AI that can learn? I get there's some benefit there, but the Terminator's gonna happen, James. Skynet's gonna get there.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I just saw some creepy AI stuff on the news, and it's getting there. You're right.
There's some creepy, and there's people like what's his name? Tesla cat, friend of the show. Elon isn't big on AI. He's
not big on Twitter either. So. I don't know what that's all about.
I just feel like there needs to be some responsibility in the development of artificial intelligence, and I'm sure they take it super seriously. But you just got to watch.
Remember when we were doing some interviews for Work, and we were talking to those AI companies, and this was a few years ago, and dude was legit like, "Oh yeah, no, that's a thing," and serious talks happen, and we know it's going to happen. Like, people in that industry just kind of accept that this is the reality of things. That's scary. All right, moving on. I'm done with history. Do you have any more?
I'm done with history. I'd like to talk. It's kind of history related, but I'd like to talk about some of the things that they have invented.
I want to talk about some of the things they invented as well.
So of all of their inventions, the one that I think is probably, and it's not in the list of like their top 5 or whatever, but
you're just deciding personally this is the best.
So every single debit card, credit card that you've ever used in your entire life has that black magnetic tape on the back of it. That records and stores all of that information. So this was actually a development by engineers and scientists at IBM that developed everything that goes into storing data on that magnetic tape. I kind of wish they would have figured out a way to make it so that people can't steal stuff off your card, because
That would have been helpful.
in the last couple of years, I've had a couple of swipes where like there must have been like a reader or something that was hooked into the machine and like my stuff got hijacked. But yeah, so I think, I mean, you use it every single day. I mean, the little chips are the new thing they're using, but the chip usually doesn't work. You got to do it 3 times and then swipe.
I do the tap doesn't work, chip doesn't work. Okay, swipe every time.
So
1969. That's a long time ago. Forrest Perry developed it, Luke. That's good stuff. Every time my credit card gets stolen, it gets used at Best Buy every time. I probably haven't shopped at Best Buy in 15 years. So
yeah, you'd think they'd know.
Out. Yeah. Next invention that I have is Fortran. Anyone who does the computers probably has heard of Fortran. It was initially developed in the early 1950s, which blows my mind, as a new way to program the early IBM mainframe computers. And it was initially proposed by John Backus. His team delivered the first compiler of its kind in 1956. It revolutionized the method by which modern computer scientists and programmers work on a daily basis. So Fortran's huge. I mean, if you haven't heard of it, go Google's machine it, because that's a big deal.
Speaking of programming languages, they've also developed SQL programming language is another thing they can credit. And then the one that I thought was kind of interesting, and I didn't know this one, and I don't know if it's like one of those debatable things where like they claim it, but others do. The first legitimate mobile phone. It was a device named the IBM Simon Personal Communicator.
Saw that.
And it was launched back on the 23rd of November, 1992, and it was designed by IBM and manufactured by Mitsubishi Electric. I think there's some debate whether that was the first one or there were some other folks that did it, but I thought that was pretty cool. It was a cool looking phone. It had like a touch screen and, you know.
Yeah, fun facts about it. The device sold about 50,000 units. Like you said, it has a touchscreen, a calculator app, email capability, and some other apps built in. It had a whopping 2 megabytes of RAM and 2 megabytes of internal storage. Watch out.
So back in this is probably this is like 90. See, I graduated 93. So this is probably like 94, 95. A buddy of mine that I went to school with, he had some pretty rich parents, and he had one of those bag phones that would like go over your shoulder.
I've never even seen
and
one
it was
of
this
those.
like huge phone, and like when you would use it and make telephone calls, it would be like hundreds of dollars. Like it, like he would get like I guess he just wasn't paying attention. He would get bills for like thousands of dollars at the end of his month, and his parents would, they were pretty rich, they would lose their mind over it and like take his bag phone off of him and then give it back to him. But I mean, it was like the size of like a suitcase, and then you would pull the phone off, and yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Wow, I needed rich friends like that.
Yeah.
Another invention that I saw, which I think they did pseudo UPCs. So universal product codes. I didn't know they did this. While they weren't really the first product organization system implemented, the UPC system is really the most successful. All the crap you buy that has those little bars and stuff on it, zip, zip, that's the noise it makes when you scan them.
It does.
That's IBM. So thank them for that.
Kids, never get a UPC on the back of your neck. Have you seen those people that get like a barcode on the back of their neck or on their hand?
I have one on my wrist. Yeah.
You do. Kids don't get tattoos. Probably the most incredible one.
Don't you have a tattoo, Luke?
I do, but I don't promote it.
Learn from Luke's mistakes.
Yeah, it's what are the chipmunks? What are their names?
Alvin,
yeah,
Simon, Theodore,
I have Alvin, Simon, and Theodore on my shoulder.
Who are the other two? They're Disney
nuts.
Ones. Chip and Dale.
Chip and Dale.
The Rescue Rangers.
So this is probably one of the biggest ones that they've ever done because they got Nobel prizes for this. So a cat by the name of Gerd Binging and Heinrich Rother
nailed that.
invented the scanning tunneling microscope. And this was used for imaging at the atomic level. So obviously all kinds of medical applications and different things. Yeah. So it was developed in 1981, and they received their Nobel Prize a mere 5 years later, which is pretty quick for a Nobel Prize, in 1986.
Yeah, that's a really big one. Also, it just seems so not what I would expect IBM to be working on.
Yeah,
right? Which
so
is cool. That's what I like when we do these. Like we
Yeah.
find stuff like that.
The interesting thing is, so they have so many, like there's Watson Medical, and like they're in all kinds of like different industries. Like the medical seems to be one of the most, I'll say, kind of things I didn't expect, like LASIK eye surgery. Did you know that like the equipment and the
I didn't
procedure
until now. Yeah.
was a thing that IBM was in? I don't know if they developed it like independently or they were just a
Right.
part of the process, but like you wouldn't be able to get LASIK eye surgery, all you people, if it wasn't for IBM.
Yeah. A few more inventions that I have listed here, but no information about. You mentioned SQL. They also did DRAM, floppy disks, which we all know and love, ATMs, and hard disk drives. So good job, IBM.
Did you call them Mac machines back in like the 90s, like the early
in St.
90s
Mary's,
and 80s?
I called them Mac machines.
Yeah.
And then I went someplace and it was like the total like stereotype.
Like nobody
right?
knew what a Mac machine was.
Like, do you guys have a Mac machine? And the person was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, a Mac machine, obviously. And no one knew.
Money Access Center.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're called.
Nobody got it.
I have a fun fact for you. Would you like a fun fact? Do you
Please.
want it?
Oh, definitely.
Right. IBM's founder and president, Tommy Toms J. Watson, has coined the motto for IBM. And it says, we all know that the slogan for IBM is think, which I did not know. But
I didn't know that either.
It's think. However, if you check out our friend Apple's slogan, it's think differently.
Jerks.
And it's suspected that Steve-O Jobs despised IBM and he improvised the slogan kind of like as a diss to IBM, like, take that, IBM, we're thinking differently.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to do is, let's say you're an engineer, you're listening to this, you want to get a job at IBM. It's probably not a bad idea. So these are what you would make at IBM total. So this is base, stock, bonuses. So entry level, you're an associate engineer. You're going to make about $100K a year starting out at IBM.
Entry level?
Entry level, and again, it's probably average. So
you know what I entry leveled at? Oof. That hurts.
$10 an hour. So about $100,000 a year. Now let's go mid-level. So you're like, you're called an advisory engineer. You're going to make about $150K a year. And then they have this thing, and this wasn't on their website, so I'm not sure like the accuracy of like the terms and the pay. If you're considered a distinguished engineer, this is the highest level of engineer inside of IBM, you make $400,000 a year. Your bonus alone has the potential to be $85K. That's pretty bananas.
If we ever stop doing the podcast and our cash flow dries up, if any of you IBMers want to offer me a job, I'd consider it.
I would even take the senior technical staff member at 257, if I had to.
Now that I have invested so much podcast money, I could survive off that, I suppose. Gosh, good job, IBM. Way to have so much money. Anything else you want to share?
That's all I got.
That is all I have as well. If any of you want to tell us what a great episode this was, how handsome we are, how funny we are, any of these things or other stuff, go ahead and email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com. And until next time.
See ya.